Ohio requires buses for private school kids. Public school students have to find their own ride. School districts are responsible for transporting private and charter school kids, leaving thousands of public school students behind. For about 2,000 students attending high school in Dayton, Ohio, there won't be a bus in sight when they walk out of the door for the beginning of the school year this week. Ohio law means that public school districts, such as Dayton's, are responsible for transporting students who attend private and charter schools. When they fail to do so, they risk fines of millions of dollars. A shortage of drivers and buses combined with the threats of fines means that public school districts in Dayton and around Ohio find themselves relegating their own students to the back of the transportation line. I'm going to have to use Uber, and it's going to cost me $25 to $30 a day to get to and from school, says Castillo. In wintertime, when demand is higher, it's probably going to be more. At 180 school days over the course of a year, that's thousands of dollars he is set to fork out from his own pocket. For the past several years, school administrators in Dayton, Cincinnati, and elsewhere have been trying to get around the problem of issuing students with bus passes for public transportation. Cincinnati and elsewhere have been trying to get around the problem by issuing students with bus passes for public transportation. I don't necessarily see any problem with that. I mean, ideally, yeah, you'd have them be in a school bus, but at least it's something, right? And I think it probably, I normally don't like to make this kind of point, but I would think that, you know, being forced to use the public transportation buses instead of your school buses might teach them some independence lessons, something that kids these days I think are lacking. So I think as a idea, look, yeah, you don't want, you would rather your kids going on a school bus than a public transport bus. But I think insofar as it's used to fill in the gaps, I think it's fine for them to do that. But children riding public buses have reported being subjected to a variety of dangers. Public transportation administrators have also reported difficulties trying to serve the public and thousands of students all at once. See, like, what I don't get about this is, like, if you think the public bus system is too dangerous for children to ride, then, like, isn't that an indictment on the public bus? Like, doesn't that mean that you're doing a poor job of securing the bus system, right? That doesn't tell me, my takeaway from that isn't don't send kids on the public school buses because it's dangerous. My obvious takeaway is, fix the public bus system so it's not dangerous. Like, ugh. But they don't want to do that because fixing the public bus system helps poor people, and they don't want to do that. The situation came to a tragic head on the morning of April 4th when 18-year-old Alfred Hale III was shot dead at the public bus hub in downtown Dayton while en route to class at Dunbar High School. Shortly after Hale's killing, Ohio lawmakers introduced a law making it illegal for Dayton public schools to buy public bus vouchers for students. The burden... Ooh, yeah, wait. So you can't say they have to provide public buses, like school buses to private and charter schools, not have enough buses for the public schools as well, and then not allow them to gap fill by like providing bus passes to the public bus system. That seems like a recipe for, like, how could they even let something like that happen? How are they not thinking about those students in the public schools who would be, like, caught in the middle of all this? How is that not, like, the major, not only a consideration of all of this, but, like, the prime consideration of all of this? The burden of getting children to school now falls on students' parents, grandparents, local churches, and charities, say officials. Families who choose to continue to have their students use public buses to get to and from school will have to fork out at least $540 per high school student a year. There seems to be an aggressive approach to the most vulnerable families and people in America, says DPS Superintendent David Lawrence. Not only is it unfair, it's onerous that public schools have to provide transportation to non-public school students. That seems absolutely crazy to me. I don't understand why you would ever implement a rule saying the public schools have to provide the school buses for the, like, I really can't, I'm trying really hard to come up with a steel man for that. What could possibly be the steel man for, like forcing the public school system to provide school buses for private and charter schools? The only thing I can think of is that maybe it would make sense if you don't trust these private and charter schools to facilitate their own busing, right? You can place a rule that says they have to provide busing to their kids, to whoever students are going there. But that makes no sense, right? If they are okay with these private and charter schools existing in the first place, of taking in these kids and having their own curriculums and being in charge of these children for 8 hours a day or whatever, the idea that you wouldn't trust them to facilitate their own busing is doesn't make any sense. The only reason I can think for this is cynical reasons, right? It's that like the Oklahoma legislature is so full of private school parents and people who don't believe in like the importance and the right for people to access good public schools, that they're just like, screw it, we don't care. I guess they're just okay with screwing over public school students. I mean, that's literally the only takeaway from this, is that. And how could you argue that this wasn't like, you would have a hard time arguing that this wasn't a feature, that this was a bug and not a feature, right? Like, how do you know that this wasn't really the goal the whole time, right? That they don't like all these leftists in these cities and they want to basically punish them. Like, this is just so ass backwards. And why would you not consider these people that are caught in the middle? How do you think it's okay for private schools to have busing funded by the state, but like school buses come to them and pick them up, take them to school by the state in these private and charter schools? That being the case, literally at the expense of public school kids, there seems to be an aggressive approach to the most vulnerable families and people in America, says DPS's Superintendent David Lawrence. Not only is it unfair, it's onerous that public schools have to provide transportation to non-public school students. I just can't even imagine. I can't think of a good faith reason as to why you would implement that rule, other than like, I can't think of a good faith reason. I can think of bad faith, cynical reasons. What's happening in Ohio is a result of a wider effort by conservative politicians to push for more children to attend charter and private schools, many of which are run by religious organizations. Republican politicians hold a supermajority across Ohio's legislature and have built up a $1 billion fund in the form of vouchers for families who want to send their students to private and charter schools. Imagine if they took that $1 billion in voucher funding or whatever that my understanding is just sitting in an account waiting to be claimed by people who are going to private and charter schools. Just imagine if they pumped that $1 billion back into their actual public schools and, oh my God, crazy idea, bought more school buses so that so that your stupid rule you implemented, how the public schools in these localities have to provide busing for these private and charter schools, you could, I don't know, buy more buses and fix the problem. This is the sort of thing that makes me think this is a feature, not a bug, that this was explicitly the point of all of this. They wanted to degrade the public school experience so that more people are funneled into the private and charter school system. Ohio is not alone. Republican-dominated state legislatures have been pushing for or have already enacted laws that see billions of dollars of taxpayer money directed to funding private school voucher systems in Texas, Florida, Iowa, Tennessee, and elsewhere. In Pennsylvania and Minnesota, where political control is largely split between Democrats and Republicans, public schools are required to provide transportation for students attending non-public schools. In January, Donald Trump signed an executive order steering taxpayer funds away from public schools to private schools. Many in Democratic-leaning cities say they are being targeted. Yeah, that's what I think. I really think that there is at least some desire on the part of these Republicans and conservatives to literally punish these Democratic-leading cities, right? They are totally fine with degrading the public school experience but only in these Democratic-leaning cities, right? Like, they're not okay with that on principle, but when it comes to these Democratic-leaning cities, they're totally fine with punishing them in this weird way. It's just a super weird anti-American mindset, right? It's a sort of mindset that doesn't see a fellow American that lives in a big city or whatever, lives in Dallas or New York or Miami or whatever, that you don't see them as part of your ilk, that you don't see them, you don't think of yourself as a fellow American standing next to them. You think of them as a totally, like, basically as a different, someone from a different country. And in that sense, you're totally fine with targeting them and punishing them in a way that you maybe wouldn't be okay with more broadly to other Americans. In Cincinnati, children as young as 13 are being forced to use public transportation to get to and from school due to funding shortages that this year will see more than 100 yellow bus routes cut. See, how can you be doing all this? How can you implement a rule that says you have to provide buses for public, private, and charter schools, and then not buy more buses, and then, at the same time you cut bus routes? In Columbus, actually, I take that back. Maybe the bus cuts were because of this whole paradigm and that they have to divert some of these yellow buses that otherwise would have gone to public schools. They have to divert them to private schools or whatever. Maybe that's the reason why they're cutting routes. I don't know. About 1.8 million, or 80% of all school-going students in Ohio, attend public schools. It's simple. If we do not have to bus non-public school students on our transportation, we could transport every single one of our K-12 students on yellow buses, says Jocelyn Reinard, a member of the Dayton Public School Board. DPS transports between 4,000 and 5,000 charter and private school students every school day. It's a direct result of the legislation from the extremist Republicans at the Ohio State House mandating that we must transport non-public students as well as public students in our district. But Republican politicians disagree. I am itching to hear their defense of this. Okay, I'm itching. I am desperate. Oh, please. I'm so excited to hear what they have to say. I have a feeling it's going to be so ridiculous. I can't even imagine. We had an 18-year-old get shot and killed. The environment for the students is not good down there. The NAACP interviewed the children. They don't want to ride the public transportation buses. They want to ride the yellow school buses, says Phil Plummer, a Republican Party state representative who spearheaded the budget amendment banning DPS from giving its students public bus vouchers. Plummer says he and others found 25 school buses that DPS could purchase. They decided not to transport their kids, he says. One thing I just thought of is if you're going to reference this 18-year-old being killed at the bus stop waiting for their public bus voucher because of the yellow school bus wasn't available, right? If you're going to think about this statistically, right? Yes, this is one guy that's got killed. And let's say maybe even there's a few more that they aren't listing in this article, right? Let's pretend a handful have gotten killed in this manner. Well, taking a yellow school bus to school is significantly safer than driving in an individual car, I would imagine. And so I would speculate that if you forced every single one of those students that would have otherwise gone on a yellow school bus to take private transportation of some regard, either their parents drive them or they have to walk or whatever else it may be, that more of them will die as a result of that than the couple or the single or a couple that get killed waiting at a bus stop, using the public bus transportation system, right? You understand what I'm saying? That that the increase in risk that you necessarily will take on by having to take other forms of transportation in lieu of the yellow school bus, that it will result in more death and destitution than the example that he's giving of this one 18-year-old getting shot waiting at a bus stop. DPS administrators, who pay drivers the highest rates in the region, say about 70 buses would be required to meet the need, a number that could take up to 2 years to procure. Lawrence said the process of buying buses and training drivers is not simple. It's an 18-month cycle. Buses are $150,000 to $190,000 each to buy, and ones with backup cameras and air conditioning are even more expensive. Then drivers have to take at least 10 tests before they become fully qualified, he says. With the law coming into effect just months before the new school year, parents, students, and public school managers have been left in a difficult situation. I'm a single dad raising 2 kids on my own. We all have to be at school at the same time. That's a big dilemma, says William Johnson, an educator at DPS, whose daughter is no longer able to get to school using a bus provided by or paid for the district. I'm lucky that my 80-year-old father is going to help out taking them to school, but I ask the state, please come up with a solution. We're going to lose a whole generation of kids if this continues. I also wouldn't be surprised if there are at least a good number of students that don't have any sort of reasonable alternative mode of transportation to the school. Maybe they have deadbeat parents and they don't have any grandparents or uncles or anybody else that's able to take them to school, and maybe the walk is unreasonably long or something, right? This could very tangibly result in students sort of being forced out of school in a way, and could result in worse educational outcomes as a result, right? You might have whole groups of people that just stop going to school at sophomore, junior year because they don't have a ride to school and there isn't really anything else they can do. Cynically, Republicans are generally okay with that because they understand that our current system of economics, our current American capitalist system, is reliant to some degree upon an underclass to do all those low-rung jobs that most people don't want to do. But yeah, this is all just insane, and to me just screams bad faith, right? Like, how could you even why would you prevent the schools from gap-filling the lack of proper yellow school buses by providing public bus vouchers? I just can't even conceive of wanting to ban that practice, right? Prevent these cities and these localities from gap filling, but then don't do anything else to address the problem of these students not having access to transportation to school, right? It's like it's like they didn't think about these public school students that would get caught in the middle and not have transportation from home to school. It's like they didn't even think about them at all, which is just gross, man. If that's supposed to be their whole job, they're the education department in Oklahoma. Their whole job is supposed to serve the school children of the state, right? So much of this just screams bad faith, just screams we want to funnel kids into private schools. We are totally okay with diminishing the public school student experience. We're okay with punishing these democratic areas by reducing their, by diminishing their public schools' capacity or ability to teach kids or whatever. Like, let's imagine for a second that you're one of the Republicans that you want to implement the change that bans localities from providing public bus vouchers to gap fill, right? I would be the very first thing I would be thinking of if I was in that weird headspace is, oh, those people that are going to get caught in the middle. How can I explain this away? How can I address these people? How can we fix this problem? How can we not have this be a huge how can this not be a bad thing politically? How can we turn this into a good thing, right? But they don't seem to be doing any of that. They didn't mention at all the kids that are going to get caught in the middle and not have access to transportation, right? He doesn't mention it at all. He just mentions that we found some buses and that we could do it. But like, it doesn't matter. What does that buy you? What, like $1.25 and that will buy you a candy bar at the store, right? It means nothing if you say, I see buses over there. We could do this. We could do that. But then you don't do it. And it's your whole job as like the education department person to sort of make sure this gets done, right? It doesn't seem to me like they're trying very hard to solve the problem, right? I don't know. I would think that I almost guarantee you they would take a different approach, or they would at least make some statements about this, like directly addressing these people that are caught in the middle.